Welcome to Inside the Arena, your source for everything off the ice, off the court, and outside the field of play. With your hosts, KOMO Sports Director Niko Tamurian and KOMO Senior Reporter Chris Daniels.
We've done it. We're here. We finally made it. The inaugural edition of Inside the Arena. That's the smooth voice of David Lee. He's been a distinctive sports voice for many years, and we're good to have him on board with this. And Niko, I'm happy to be on board with you.
I'm thrilled to be on board with you. Inside the Arena.
We finally are inside the arena.
Wow. Hey, I just like hearing you say that. And I'll say this, man, like, what's going to make this show so special is what we see every day in the Seattle sports community. There's so many stories. There's so many teams. I always joke around with it, but it's a true fact that there is no slow period. There's no downtime when it comes to Seattle sports. There's always something to talk about.
And there's going to be a lot of stuff that we're going to be talking about that is off the ice, off the field, off the court. And one of those big things is going to be the return of the Sonics. In a NIL realignment, TV digital rights deals, construction projects. We're going to start today with interviews with the new Kraken head coach, why that matters off the ice. You'll hear from the X-Man, Xavier McDaniel, and the latest on the return of the NBA and what's going on regarding planning for the World Cup in 2 years in Seattle. But first, let's touch all of the bases as part of Four Corners, Niko.
Yeah, and I want to start with our Seattle Mariners because I think this is a turning point for this team. Listen, the wins and losses, that's going to ebb and flow over the course of a 162-game season. I often joke around. I was getting some nasty emails when this team was 6-10. Chris, I didn't reply to them because there were 16 games into 162. They're like, oh, you said this was a World Series caliber rotation. I still think it is. And we're seeing that it is nowadays. But here's what I'm talking about. Like, okay, there's going to be winning streaks. There's going to be losing streaks. What I'm talking about for my first of the Four Corners, I mean, we're talking about a diamond. You got to talk baseball.
Right.
Is this was a relatively rough off season for that team. You missed the playoffs by a game. Some comments that maybe weren't expressed in the best of ways from the general manager, the president of baseball operations, Sherry DePoto. And fans were saying, oh, we're not going to spend our money. We're this, we're that. Well, here we are. You've got a first place baseball team with 101 games to go. Okay. You've got a team that's drawing 40,000 plus. And so why I want to start with this is the standpoint of it's a long ways to go, but for what this could have been, for how down things seemed in the wintertime, you're talking about a first place team that is drawing like crazy. And I think that the front office has really navigated something really masterfully to have a team that's in first place in June for the first time since 2003. The question moving forward is, are they going to navigate the trade deadline masterfully? And that remains to be seen. But as of right now, they've taken what's been a rough situation and they've made the most of it.
Yeah, people, I think, right out of the gate were saying Trident's down, right? They wanted Poto and others fired and wanted to tear up the team. And now we see, hey, it's a question of who they add, as you said, and how the TV and digital rights, Root Sports future, how that all factors into things. But, talking about TV, digital rights, I mean, when we talk about Four Corners, is there anything right now hotter than women's sports and TV ratings in particular? The WNBA, of course, I think by all accounts now, if you have a pulse, you've heard the name Caitlin Clark. She is a phenomenon. She was a phenomenon in college at the University of Iowa, and I put it out there on X. It's still hard for me to call it X, Twitter, that in the Iowa-South Carolina game, that really felt like a moment in time that was like Bird and Magic in 1979. Yeah. A moment that you will think back on and say, this is when the sport changed. The NBA changed with that college basketball game and those two men going into that league. And now we're talking about Angel Reese, Caitlin Clark going to the WNBA, and the ratings already. Fifth audience of at least 1 million viewers this season in the short amount of time that the WNBA has been playing this year. They had not hit the 1 million viewer mark in 16 years. This is the Caitlin Clark phenomenon. We saw a sold-out Climate Pledge Arena with the Seattle Storm playing there. We know what has happened now with the Storm, with their new training facility down in Inner Bay. That is a franchise that is trying to take advantage of it. And maybe at the best possible time, taking advantage of all the interest in women's sports. And you see, just even sports talk radio is talking about the Caitlin Clark and what just happened in a game, and did she get hit? Was that a hard hit? It is different. It feels different right now for women's sports, whether it be the WNBA or the NWSL.
I agree, and I'll say this: it was really cool to be there covering Caitlin's game at Climate Pledge Arena and to see the buzz. And what was interesting is obviously so many fans were there. You mentioned the sellout; they were there to root on Caitlin and to see her in person. Even if we did get to see her in person in 2023 when her Hawkeyes won the Seattle Regional in the NCAA tournament. But what was really cool to see is that as the game went on, the Storm, of course, won that matchup, and eventually it was like this pride. Okay, we beat Caitlin Clark's team. Okay, a lot of people have this season so far, but you nailed it. It's the idea that the ratings are up, that there's a renewed interest in what, in my opinion, has already been a great product, right? And now you have the WNBA talking expansion and things like that. I think that, you talk about a Magic and Bird type phenomenon, maybe even a Jordan type phenomenon to go a few years later. I think that's what we're seeing right now.
It's going to be fun to watch, as is the college sports world. Here we are.
Yeah.
Now talking about it already.
I got to say this. If you're an observer of the college sports craziness that we've seen over the last year to 2 years, whatever, it would appear on paper that the Huskies are winners in this whole thing, right? They navigated out of the uncertainty. They made it to the Big Ten, what might be one of the Power Two one day. We'll see how that all, goes. But here, I wonder how they're going to navigate it. Because again, the name of the game was to get to that stable league. And to that regard, sure, they did a great job. No question about that. But I wonder if it's going to be different than in what it seems in reality to go to the Big Ten. Like, you were in this Pac-12 that you were relatively successful all the time in. Now you're going to this Big Ten league. And certainly it's not the first time anybody's thought about the idea that of the toll that is going to be taken from these coastal East Coast to West Coast trips to go play Rutgers in New Jersey and volleyball in January and all these things like that. Like, I'm not the first one to say that, but I'm also talking about how they end up faring. They're not getting the full share of money, but also competitively against these monsters of programs in Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State. The list goes on. I mean, I'm just thinking about this from the standpoint of, okay, you got yourself secure, but are you going to be lost in the shadow of these giants? And I think eventually, just my 2 cents on this, I think eventually football becomes its own governing body. And we've talked about this as, after every newscast, Chris and I talk for a while. Sometimes it can go an hour or two. But, so we've talked about this from the standpoint that I think eventually football breaks off and becomes its own entity. And then the Olympic sports, headlined by basketball, becomes something governed by the NCAA. And you're still seeing March Madness, NCAA tournament be the cash cow that it is, because that's part of the sport is not broken. But I also think that as you look at that, I want to point out something that Troy Dannon, who was the AD at UW for about like 4 seconds. No, it was 5 months, but now he's currently at Nebraska. He said to me, and I'll never forget this, and I'm going to keep it in the back of my mind as I think we see this all unfold. He said that, Niko, if you think the last couple of years of college athletics have been crazy, the next 3 to 5 years are going to put it to shame. Ominous, right?
Yeah, I mean, and it's interesting too what's going to happen with Washington State University. I just saw John Wilner from the San Jose Mercury News report this week that WSU and OSU are actually going to have more homes that they will be seen in this year in the football season than they were in their previous incarnation in the Pac-12. That with the CW deal and, shameless plug, the Washington State and Oregon State games will be on the KUNS here in Seattle, our sister station, that they're actually going to have more people that will have access to watch the games. Whether they're going to watch Mountain West games, that's another story. Speaking of not watching games, how about that for a transition? The Sounders, as we round out our 4 corners here, I think we can objectively say the interest in the franchise is waning. This seems to be a perilous time right now for the Sounders, who have been struggling both on the field and off it. They've been in the lower third of the Western Conference already. This is the 50th anniversary of the first incarnation of the Sounders back in the NASL days. And we saw in the first game of this season, or the first match of this season, all the way through May, that enthusiasm in the stands is starting to dwindle. The last match at home, only right around 30,000, which a lot of MLS franchises would take. But this is a franchise that has established themselves in the Seattle market, right out of the gate, getting over 40,000 fans for every match since day one. And now they are in a competitive marketplace that includes the Kraken, potentially the Sonics on the way. They've redone their merch, their logos. They've redone the headquarters. All of that seems to be going well. But this is one of those things that could become a slippery slope if the fans do not show up, because that is a business model that has been built here in Seattle based on the fact they were so great out of the gate, Niko.
Well, and I think that is a product of, you mentioned, quite frankly, of the Kraken arrival, because you have another team that's taking interest. Now, granted, the seasons don't overlap a ton. Maybe, you're talking about the end of the NHL season coming around the first 2 months. And then, of course, the start of a new Kraken season coming in, presumably you would hope playoff time. But that's the thing, and the Sounders, they missed the playoffs and they made it, but they didn't go on one of their patented runs. And I just think that winning cures everything, right? But this was the time that, in my opinion, was the most important time for this team to go on one of those runs that we saw just a few years ago. And instead they missed the playoffs.
Right.
And so you have to see that. And it looks like this season we've seen flashes of brilliance. We've seen some of the stuff that's made Brave Green fans just like want to pull their hair out the last few years. If they go on a run, I think they'll be okay. But we got to see that first.
Well, and you just mentioned the Kraken. That seemed like a great segue, because they've had some changes of their own over the Kraken community iceplex.
Disco Dan Bylsma.
Yes.
You don't know that nickname?
No, Disco Dan. Sure. He loves his Bee Gees or something like that.
I'm going to go a little bit inside the arena on this one. I don't know. Is that like a new thing here? I don't know.
I think that is a new thing.
So Bylsma, obviously, one of the big things in his hiring from the Kraken was the fact that he won the Stanley Cup in Pittsburgh, lasted 6 years there, and then eventually goes to Buffalo, and it does not work out in any way, shape, or form in Buffalo. And so I have some friends that, cover the Sabres that work in that Buffalo market. One of them is a big radio name out there. I'm not going to name names, although by saying that I probably outed him already because I go on his show often. But I texted him like, hey, what do you think, Bylsma? And he's just like, meh. But I'm also, let's remember, that was 8 years ago.
Yeah.
8 years ago is a long time, especially in the vicious cycle that is hockey. And what we've seen from Dan Bylsma since then is this, he kind of paid his dues to get back. And, I love that he said, yeah, I joined the Kraken organization with my eye on the Coachella job, not the Kraken job. And yes, that's the politically right thing to say because it was Dave Hackstall's job. But I think it was genuine. And I think it was genuine from the standpoint that he wanted to give head coaching one last shot. He wanted to see what was what. And what he's done with Coachella is taken a veteran-laden team the first year all the way to one overtime goal away from winning the whole darn thing, the Calder Cup. This year, he has a lot more of those super young Kraken prospects, and they're knocking on the door already in the conference finals. So I like the fact, I don't care what level it is, that he's taken two different kinds of teams and taken them essentially to the same point. I think we've seen a rebirth of Bylsma in the league. What do you think about that?
Well, didn't you talk to him? Didn't he say some of that stuff?
I did. But, I just wanted to give that preface that okay, I didn't say, hey, by the way, somebody in Buffalo, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The more I think about it, and as we'll see in a second, the more I talk to the guy, I'm sold on this hire. Let's take a listen to what he had to say. We're here with Dan Bylsma, the new leader of the Seattle Kraken. First of all, welcome to Seattle.
Thank you.
And
Thank you. Super excited.
Yeah, and let's talk about that, because right now you're coaching Coachella Valley, just a step away from the Calder Finals. Yet you're taking this new job here. Just what this all is like for you right now.
A little bit of a whirlwind for sure. Obviously, over the past 2 weeks or so, there's been discussions about this opportunity and joining Ron and the Kraken organization. At the same time, we've been in the midst of playoffs down there, and we've been waiting for the next opponent in the third round to be coming up, and we get it on Sunday night, and this is happening and finalized. So a bit of a whirlwind for sure in the last couple days, and I'm super excited about the opportunity. I've been in Seattle. I've been in this great city the last 3 years with the Kraken in the fall at training camps. Experience the fans, experience the community, experience the players here, and to have the opportunity to come here and coach next year was going to be, it's super excited about it. Having said that, going to be getting on a plane here real quick and going back to try to finish the job in CV.
Well, we'll be watching that, and certainly when we talk about the work you've done with those young guys, certainly we've seen some of them here in Seattle. How exciting is that you get to continue that development now here in Seattle?
That's the joy of coaching. I just, individually and team-wise, coach them up, get them on a path, see how good they can become. And when you see guys like Joey Decord come up and have success, when you see Tyler Cartier come up and have success, Riker Evans come up and have success, that's what it's all about. But it doesn't change at the National Hockey League what level any different. These guys are trying to continually to get better and get the most out of their careers, get the most out of the Seattle Kraken organization and our team, and that will be a focus, and that will continue next year.
And you've got a great veteran core here, guys that we love to watch. That's going to be a unique blend, right? Some of the young guys as they rise, but those guys that have been here from the start of this franchise.
Yeah, the strength of an organization always is building and continue to build and continue to build, and you do that through the draft, and you do that through prospects getting better and coming up. But ultimately, the success of the team is the players that you have here and the veterans that you have here, and we have quality, good players throughout the lineup. Jared McCann and Ebbs and Schwartzy and Matty Bernier is development guys, but still getting better in his career, and that'll happen next year. And on the back end, Vince Dunn has shown how important he is to the team. How he's played and him being out of the lineup, and it's been a huge factor for this team last year. And but we got good players, and the ultimate goal is to win hockey games currently right now, and we have a good group to do that.
Absolutely. Now, finish with this. You've won a Stanley Cup as a coach. You played in over 400 games as a player. At this stage, the challenge of this, what makes this even more exciting to make that next chapter of your hockey life?
I'm really maybe learned over the course of many years, but all about right now. This is the only moment that I have to look forward to, and it's just super exciting opportunity. And I will certainly draw upon the past, but I'm super excited about getting this group, these guys, this team, and getting started next year.
Well, Coach, we'll be watching in Coachella Valley. Can't wait to see you for training camp here in the summer.
Thank you.
Best of luck.
Thank you.
Chris, I don't know that I've seen a guy that was the American League coach and the NHL coach of the same franchise at the same time. I got to look in the record books for that.
Yeah, you may be right. That may be a first.
It might be. Did you know he had 19 goals in his NHL career?
I did not. That's 19 more than me.
Ducks and Kings.
I will say, interesting time for the franchise. You and I both know this. It felt like that move from Dave Haxtell was done for business purposes. People were giving up their season tickets to the Kraken at year 3 because you had to sign up for 3 or 5 or 7 year deals. The ratings weren't great at Root, so it almost felt like, hey, there was this business reason to make a change to get people invigorated. The Kraken walked away from their Root TV deal to try something new. They're going to Amazon and to a local broadcaster. You and I both know, Niko, that there was a lot of interest amongst local station groups with being the Kraken partner. I think that's a great deal for the Kraken with Amazon, because it does look like Amazon is going to be a long-time TV player, TV digital rights player with the NFL, the NBA, and the NHL, which we'll get into in a second because that does play into the Sonics. It'll be interesting to see how that local broadcast element does work, how many people still go to traditional television to watch those games. It was such a big number, though. This is one of the things that people forget, whether we're talking about the Mariners with Root or the Kraken with Root or even the Blazers with Root, is that money really funds a lot of jobs in these franchises. And so the local broadcasting money, however big a number that was with the local partner, probably helped the Kraken avoid any sort of layoffs. I know that when we talk about the Mariners with Root, it's whether they're going to go spend money because they don't know how much money they're losing from Root. So whether it be Root in Seattle, Bally Sports across the country, which isn't in Seattle, all of that impacts local teams. Still a question on distribution on a local television network or local television station, how that's going to work with so many people streaming.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned it right there. The movement of Dave Haxtell, to me, screams that. It's the same notion when a college football program that's middle of the road always goes 7-5, 6-6. They fire the coach and bring somebody else in, and they think that magically they're going to go 12-0. Well, no, that's not really what they think. It's the idea that we're going to get donors excited, i.e. Kraken. You got to get season ticket holders excited. It's out of the sports book 101, in my opinion, and that's why they did it. No question.
Well, and I just mentioned, we're going to talk about Amazon here as we talk about the return of the Sonics. How about a minute on the Supersonics? Although we're probably going to go longer than a minute. We'll call this the Supersonic Minute with the NBA Finals starting this week. We are, full disclosure, recording this before Adam Silver addresses the media on Game 1 of the NBA Finals, which may shed some light on the current state of affairs with TV digital rights deals and expansion. But we do know a lot of people are watching this closely here in Seattle, including the X-Man, Xavier McDaniel. You talked to him, Niko.
And I enjoyed the conversation. And Chris, you know this.
Yeah.
What's really cool about when you talk to these former players is they're all, in some way, shape, or form, still plugged in. And they also are all talking about the same thing that we are. They want the Sonics back. Whether it's, Gary Payton saying he wants to get, Detleft's jersey up in the rafters, which inevitably will happen when this, does one day happen, the return of the NBA. And for X, he's talking about how, he actually, he talked about how it bothered him that he didn't have a home without Seattle having an NBA team. I don't want to take too much away. We'll hear what he has to say in a second. And that it was just such a special environment here. All these former players are excited to see what unfolds here inevitably in the next few months, maybe beyond that. Let's take a look at my conversation with the X-Man.
We all know the rumor of the Sonics coming back is at a fever pitch, and we know the NBA timeline is right there. Just your take on the whole situation of, maybe we'll see some good news and how exciting that would be.
I think it'd be very exciting for not just Seattle, but the whole NBA community, because everybody's still talking about how they used to come to Seattle and they want to play, in the Pacific Northwest. Seattle's a great city to be in.
We talked about the excitement. It almost, like you said, Seattle and Vegas are the two cities. What do you hear from friends still in the league, whatever, about the possibility of all this happening?
Everybody is rooting that Seattle get it. And then you just got to, it's a waiting game. I think they're waiting on the media rights to switch up. And that's why they're going to be announcing. I think it's probably not going to be until the 25-26 season.
Absolutely. Well, Xavier McDaniel, we appreciate your time.
Xavier McDaniel, the X-Man.
I've got a couple quick stories on the
Go for it.
I would advise anybody who loves Seattle and loves filmmaking to watch Singles. There's X-Man. X-Man is in Singles. And it's funny how the NBA has changed. The WNBA is just getting their own charter flights, which has been long overdue. The NBA didn't have charter flights at one point. And I can still remember going to SeaTac Airport as a youngster with X-Man at his peak with the Sonics. And there he is checking in at the counter with the rest of the Sonics. They were all flying commercial and going through the airport as normal individuals, so to speak, and walking up and trying to get an autograph from him. I mean, he was the guy before Sean and Gary, right, in Seattle. He just had that swagger, that cool, knocking people down, choking out Matthews. I think we've all seen that photo. It's going to be interesting. One of the things we're going to talk about a lot on Inside the Arena is the Sonics. And we are recording this before the NBA Finals. And Niko, you know this, the question I get asked the most in Seattle is, when are the Sonics coming back?
I think the mayor keeps asking you that too.
The mayor has brought that up. Chris, we'll get back to you. Chris, do you have any Sonics questions? Comes up at a lot of these press conferences too with the mayor. But let's lay this out. I try to tell everybody this has been telegraphed at this point a year in advance by Adam Silver. He said last year at the NBA Finals that the NBA would have their digital rights deal by the second or third quarter of this year. Guess where we are? Right in the middle of that, almost at the end of the second quarter. And then they will turn to expansion. He has also gone on record saying Vegas and Seattle are at the top of the list for the NBA. We know that there are people behind the scenes that are preparing for this schedule as well, whether it be Bruce Harrell or the Seattle City Council. I just heard them talking about the Sonics this week. There are people trying to line up financing for this right now. As of right now, as we record this, there's been good reporting from the likes of John Orrand and others suggesting the NBA will re-up with ESPN and Amazon as a new partner, a streaming partner. And then there will be a third partner, NBC and either TNT, TBS, which has been a long-time home for the NBA. But Orrand reported this week, he's on Puck now, he used to be at the Sports Business Journal, that the deal is still weeks away. So in the context of all this, X-Man kind of laid it out there too, that the NBA team in Seattle, presuming that expansion is addressed immediately by the NBA in some form, wouldn't start until 2026, which is going to be a big year in Seattle already with the World Cup. And I recently had a chat with April Putney. She's the Chief Strategy Officer for the local organizing committee. And I asked her where things stand now 2 years out. Is the region ready for the World Cup in 2026?
Absolutely. I mean, at this stage, we're really in the planning stage. And so all of the partners from the public sector are heavily engaged at the local level, at the state level, at the federal level. We're very, very grateful for that. Today's Region Ready, put on by the Seattle Sports Commission, is an amazing opportunity to be talking to the business leaders as well and having them sort of learn more about what's happening. So I think, you know, we are exactly where we need to be right now, and we are confident we'll be where we need to be to hold safe, successful, fun, inclusive games in 2026.
So you had folks representing transportation, representing safety, public safety. What kind of things are you talking about at this point now, a couple of years out, specifically when it comes to transportation, getting people up and down I-5, for instance?
So the good news is, because the games are going to be played at Lumen Field, where they have major filled out games all the time, we already have a playbook to be building from. And so right now the conversations are really sort of looking at the plans that we have for a typical full game day and seeing how do we need to adjust that and mitigate for any of the major changes that we'll see in FIFA at the World Cup. So an example, right, is because the FIFA World Cup has nations playing, not just teams playing, we expect to have more dignitaries from across the world here in attendance, and that dictates just a larger security perimeter. And so taking that into account, making the adjustments that we're going to need to our transportation plan to keep everybody moving.
How much pressure are you putting on Sound Transit right now to get the Cross Lake crossing, so to speak, done in time? Because I've heard that timeline getting pushed out to 2025. Boy, it'd be nice if that was here in time for the World Cup.
Our transit partners are absolutely doing everything they can to both be delivering mobility here today and now, as well as the massive transit expansion that our region's going to be facing, nearly doubling the light rail lines between now and 2026. We are so excited. I know I'm counting down the days until I can take the train across the bridge and up to Snohomish and down to Federal Way. You know, we know the agency is working really hard, and we're excited.
You're in a position where you don't want to put a lot of pressure on folks, but you've got a couple of, there's a few different projects here that really do need to get done by the time 2026 rolls around, whether it be the waterfront or whether it be Sound Transit. What do those conversations look like at this point?
Yeah, we have regular transportation meetings every couple of weeks with our sort of core public agencies where we're sharing information as we get it. They're sharing information with us. And so, I think that's sort of exactly where and how we need it to be going right now. And then we have regular meetings with the mayor's office and really every part of the city government.
I've had the pleasure of covering a couple of Olympics and know that there is a tremendous amount of security that goes into it that's not just reliant on one city to carry off. What kind of resources are you going to need here? Where do those resources come from to make sure that people are not only getting around but getting around safely?
Yeah, thank you, Chris. That's such an important piece. I think that speaks to the sort of international and national effort of these tournaments as well, right? It's not just games being played here at Lumen Field and up in Vancouver. It's games being played across 16 cities in North America. And then here, when we have games played here in Seattle, we're also going to be having fan activations across the state to make sure that everyone can be a part of it. And so the conversations we're having right now around security and safety are really focused on getting the structures right, making sure that we have the right organizational structures at all levels of government and in the private sector as well, to make sure that we are set up. There's
a question that comes to mind, having talked with Visit Seattle about this, the idea about visas and how troublesome it's been for people who come from outside the country to come to an event like this. There's going to be a lot of people who are traveling internationally that may not even realize they have to get a visa now to come to watch the World Cup here. What are those conversations like now 2 years out? Because for some countries, it could take 2 years to get a visa to come to Seattle.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think that that's a really good highlight of sort of the dividing and conquering of how we're going about organizing this. And so our host city is really focused on, once somebody gets to Seattle or gets to our state, what is their experience and how do they get to the stadium or to a fan zone or wherever it is they're trying to go. And so that's where we're really zeroed in on. FIFA and our federal government partners are really working on the immigration and visa issues to make sure that people can get into the country, can travel freely and easily and accessibly between the different host cities. So that's a conversation, I think, a little bit better for FIFA, unfortunately, but I know those conversations are definitely happening, and the presidential administration is very engaged at the national level.
That, again, April Putney with the World Cup Organizing Committee. She was speaking with me at Region Ready, which was something the Sports Commission, Seattle Sports Commission, put on. And there's only a handful of employees. They've got a lot of work to do here in the next couple of years. And that's going to be one of the things we're going to be talking about here on the pod, so to speak. It's time for a final buzzer, isn't it?
We're going to do a buzzer sound? I like it. Hey, here's my final buzzer, my final thoughts on this, because the NBA finals are now underway. And with that, I would just say, watch this. And for the first time, maybe in a while, watch it without the lamenting of the fact that the Sonics haven't been here in now 16 years. Watch it with anticipation. Watch it with the idea that we're going to get this thing back. And who knows, that process has to play out, of course. And everybody that Chris and I talks to, they have that cautious optimism, but they always say, let the process play out. But I'm saying to you as a fan, enjoy it this year. And it doesn't hurt to root for Mark Cuban, who was one of just two owners to vote against the Sonics relocation. I'm just going to say that. And I'm going to add one more story, because what I like about these NBA stories is that we're going to get so many more soon.
Yeah.
But you talked about Xavier McDaniel. I did a promotional bit with Jimmy Kimmel. It was done remotely. It looked like we were standing next to each other, but we were talking to each other over the headset. And of course, he used to do radio here in Seattle. And Jimmy said, Niko, one time the old Key Arena was leaking so bad, we didn't know if that was sweat or raindrops on Xavier McDaniel's forehead. And I told X that, and he loved it. He was like, oh my God, you got to get me the clip of that. But the point is this, that old thing's gone. The arena, as you know, this guy spent more time on it than anybody. The arena problem has been solved. And I can just watch these NBA finals with the anticipation and excitement that maybe, just maybe, not just games, but something of that level of games will be back here sooner rather than later.
And shameless plug, those games will be seen on KOMO in Seattle. How about that for a final buzzer? We got so much more that we're going to talk about over the next weeks and months ahead, but let's hand it over to the man, David Lee.
You've been listening to Inside the Arena with Niko and Chris. Please subscribe on your favorite platform. Until next time.